Hello, and welcome to Support for Worried Homeschooling Parents, a place dedicated to supporting and reassuring you on your home education journey. Today's video is going to be a little different from the ones I have added to the channel so far. It is so different, it required me to take some extra training to clear and freshen up my understanding. This video is for parents and carers of children with ADHD. ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is a very common reason why children have difficulties at school or home, and often why children are taken out of the formal school setting and home educated. If your child has ADHD, understanding the condition in detail can make a huge difference in your relationship with your child and the overall experience of living with and educating a child or children with ADHD. Most people picture the stereotype, the fidgety kid who can't sit still, tapping their pencil, bouncing in their chair. But ADHD is so much more than that. It's not just about restlessness. It's a neurodevelopmental condition that affects a child every moment of every day. Every sound, every thought, every piece of information that enters the brain is filtered through the chaos of ADHD. ADHD isn't just about attention, it's about identity, confidence, and how the world responds to a child who thinks and learns differently. The ADHD brain is like a Ferrari engine with go-kart brakes. Dr. Edward Ned Hallowell, a well-known psychiatrist and ADHD expert. He uses this analogy to describe how people with ADHD have very powerful, fast-processing brains like a Ferrari engine, but struggle with self-regulation and impulse control, akin to having weak brakes that can't properly control the speed or impulses of the brain. So now you're starting to see your child is dealing with multiple symptoms, often demoralizing and exhausting every moment of every day. From both a student's and a parent's perspective, ADHD and traditional schooling often clash. However, this does not mean that children with ADHD are unable to learn or inevitably have learning difficulties. In fact, it often seems that what is labeled as a learning difficulty is really a teaching difficulty. Teachers face significant constraints and must manage the needs of an entire class. Many classroom requirements are simply not suited to the way children with ADHD learn without considerable support and adaptation. As a result, the challenges are persistent and predictable. This is why we often refer to children with ADHD as having additional needs in the school environment. They require extra help to engage with a system that wasn't designed with their learning style in mind. Understanding ADHD through mental processes. To understand ADHD, it helps to look at the mental processes, also called cognitive functions, that are affected. ADHD is defined by three main symptoms: problems with attention, impulsivity, acting without thinking, hyperactivity, being unusually restless or overactive. When researchers give people with ADHD different thinking and memory tests, they often find that performance is lower compared to people without ADHD. This is because several important mental skills are disrupted in ADHD. Executive functions, the brain's control center. Three of the most important skills affected in ADHD are called executive functions. These are like the brain's control system, helping us plan, focus, and manage behavior. Working memory. This is the ability to hold information in mind for a short time and use it. Example, remembering a phone number long enough to dial it, or keeping track of steps in a math problem. In ADHD, a child may forget instructions quickly, like being told to get your shoes, coat, and backpack, but only remembering one of them. Response inhibition. This is the ability to stop yourself from doing something inappropriate or unnecessary. Example, not blurting out an answer in class before the teacher finishes the question. In ADHD, a child may struggle to hold back impulses, like shouting out, interrupting, or grabbing something without asking. Cognitive flexibility. This is the ability to switch between tasks or adjust when rules change. Example: switching from playing a game to starting homework without a meltdown. In ADHD, a child may get stuck on one activity and find it very hard to shift gears. Other attention-related difficulties in ADHD. In addition to executive functions, research shows that ADHD also affects other types of attention and timing skills. Selective attention, the ability to focus on one thing while ignoring distractions. Example: listening to the teacher while other kids are whispering. In ADHD, a child may be pulled away by every little sound or movement. Sustained attention, the ability to stay focused on a task for a long time. Example: reading a book for 20 minutes without losing track. In ADHD, a child may start strong, but quickly lose focus, especially on boring or repetitive tasks. Response precision, the ability to respond accurately and consistently. Example: hitting the right key on a keyboard at the right time. In ADHD, responses may be rushed, sloppy, or inconsistent. Temporal information processing, the ability to understand and keep track of time. Example: knowing how long 5 minutes feels or clapping in rhythm to music. In ADHD, a child may underestimate or overestimate time, making it hard to manage schedules or wait their turn. ADHD affects executive functions, working memory, response inhibition, cognitive flexibility that act like the brain's control system. It also disrupts different types of attention, selective and sustained, timing skills, response precision, and temporal processing. These difficulties explain why children and adults with ADHD may struggle with focus, self-control, switching tasks, and managing time. Understanding these brain-based challenges helps explain why ADHD is not about laziness or bad behavior, but about real differences in how the brain processes information and controls attention. Now, if you are still with us, well done. I know this stuff isn't easy to take in all in one go. Understanding how ADHD affects the brain is very important to choosing an approach for treating and living with it. Maybe take a break here for a minute before we head on into some brain science. Understanding attention and ADHD. Selective attention is the brain's ability to focus on certain things while ignoring others. This skill is especially important in school, work, and everyday life. Research on ADHD has shown that difficulties with selective attention are a key part of the condition. There are two main types of selective attention: endogenous attention, goal-directed. This is when attention is guided by personal goals or intentions. Example: feeling hungry and looking for food, choosing to focus on a teacher's voice during class. Think of endogenous attention as steering the car yourself, you decide where to go. Exogenous attention, stimulus-driven. This is when attention is pulled away by something in the environment, even if it wasn't the goal. Example: smelling food and suddenly feeling distracted, a phone ringing, or a notification popping up while trying to study. Think of exogenous attention as someone suddenly grabbing the steering wheel. Your focus shifts, whether you want it to or not. In ADHD, both types of selective attention can be disrupted. Endogenous attention problems. A child may struggle to stay focused on the teacher's voice because their own thoughts keep intruding. Exogenous attention problems. A child may be overly sensitive to distractions, like a door slamming or noises outside the classroom. This means that children and adults with ADHD may find it harder to keep their attention where it needs to be, whether that's because of internal distractions, thoughts, or external ones, sounds, sights, or movements. Researchers use special tasks to measure both types of attention in people, animals, and even with brain imaging. Brain scans allow scientists to see which areas of the brain are active during attention tasks. Over time, this research has helped identify specific brain circuits involved in attention. While scientists don't yet fully agree on every detail, they have a good idea of which brain regions are most important. One brain region that stands out in ADHD research is the prefrontal cortex. This area is responsible for reasoning, planning, decision-making, moderating behavior. The PFC acts like the control center of the brain, helping to direct attention and manage distractions. Studies using brain imaging have shown that the PFC often works differently in children, teens, and adults with ADHD compared to those without ADHD. This difference may explain why focusing, planning, and controlling impulses can be more challenging for people with ADHD. Key takeaways. Selective attention is the ability to focus on what matters and ignore distractions. Endogenous attention is goal-driven, choosing to focus. Exogenous attention is stimulus-driven, being pulled by distractions. ADHD can affect both types, making it harder to stay focused. The prefrontal cortex plays a major role in attention and is often found to function differently in ADHD. Understanding how attention works in ADHD helps explain why everyday tasks like listening in class, finishing homework, or staying on track can be more difficult, and why support and strategies are so important. Again, if you are still with us, well done. You probably didn't sign up for a brain science course, but understanding how ADHD affects the brain is very important to choosing an approach for treating and living with it. Well done. Maybe take another break. Pause the video here for a minute before we head on in to some more brain science. Delayed development in the frontal cortex is one of the most important areas of the brain for attention, planning, and self-control. In children with ADHD, this part of the brain develops more slowly than in children without ADHD. The brain doesn't just rely on individual brain cells, it also depends on the connections between them. These connections are called axons, and together they form what's known as white matter. It looks white when the brain is studied under a microscope. Axons are like electrical wires that carry messages between brain cells. To work properly, these wires need insulation. In the brain, this insulation is called myelin, a fatty coating that helps signals travel quickly and efficiently. With good myelination, signals move like electricity through a well-insulated wire, fast and reliable. With reduced myelination, signals slow down, like electricity leaking from a frayed wire. Research shows that in ADHD, there can be less myelination in some brain areas, including the PFC. The less myelination there is, the more severe the symptoms tend to be. Brain imaging studies show that the PFC is less active in people with ADHD. This reduced activity is linked to difficulties with focus and self-control. Interestingly, ADHD medications can help normalize this activity, making the PFC work more like it does in people without ADHD, which we will come to. Different brain chemicals, called neurotransmitters, play roles in attention. Acetylcholine helps with exogenous attention. Dopamine helps with endogenous attention. Some studies suggest that acetylcholine receptors, the locks that acetylcholine fits into, may not work normally in ADHD. But most research has focused on dopamine since it plays such a central role in motivation, reward, and attention. Dopamine is part of a group of neurotransmitters called monoamines, which also include serotonin and noradrenaline. These chemicals are made in small areas of the brain, but their axons spread out widely, influencing many different brain regions. Because of this, changes in dopamine don't just affect attention. They can also play a role in other conditions, such as addiction and psychosis. ADHD is very complex. Scientists don't yet know exactly how all the different neurotransmitters and brain regions are affected. It's likely that ADHD involves problems with connectivity, how different brain networks talk to each other. Researchers are still working hard to understand these patterns, but what's clear is that ADHD involves both brain development and brain chemistry. Key takeaways: the frontal cortex develops more slowly in ADHD. White matter connections may be weaker due to reduced myelination, slowing down brain signals. The PFC shows less activity in ADHD, but medication can help normalize this. Acetylcholine and dopamine both play roles in attention, with dopamine being especially important. ADHD likely involves altered connectivity between brain networks, making it a complex condition that researchers are still working to fully understand. If you are still here, you are clearly dedicated to learning more about ADHD and how to live with and educate a child with this very serious condition. Understanding how ADHD affects the brain is very important to choosing an approach for treating and living with it. Well done. Maybe take another break, pause the video here for a minute, have a drink maybe, before we head on to the last part. The brain is made up of billions of nerve cells called neurons. These neurons talk to each other using tiny chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. One of the most important neurotransmitters for attention and focus is dopamine. Neurons don't actually touch each other. Instead, there are tiny gaps between them called synapses. To send a message, one neuron releases neurotransmitters into the gap, and the next neuron picks them up using special receptors. Think of it like this. The neurotransmitter is a key. The receptor is a lock. The key has to fit into the lock for the message to go through. Once the message is delivered, the neurotransmitter is released back into the gap. But it can't just stay there forever, otherwise the signal would never stop. The brain has a few ways to clean up. 1. Reuptake. The neurotransmitter is sucked back into the first neuron through special recycling doors called transporters. 2. Breakdown. Enzymes act like scissors, cutting the neurotransmitter into pieces so it no longer works. 3. Drifting away. The neurotransmitter simply floats off and is no longer near the receptors. Genes and ADHD. Researchers found that certain genes, the instructions inside our cells, can affect how dopamine works in the brain. Some of these genes may increase the risk of ADHD. The dopamine transporter gene, SLC6A3. This gene gives instructions for making the dopamine transporter the recycling door that pulls dopamine back into the neuron. Some people have a version of this gene with 9 repeats in its sequence. This version has been linked to ADHD in adults. Others have a version with 10 repeats, which has been linked to ADHD in children. Both versions seem to make the brain produce more dopamine transporters. That means dopamine gets cleared away from the synapse too quickly, so the message doesn't last long enough. Imagine trying to talk to someone, but the words disappear before they can finish listening. The dopamine receptor gene, DRD4, gives instructions for making a type of dopamine receptor called D4. Remember, receptors are the locks that dopamine keys fit into. Some people have a longer version of this gene. This version makes the receptor less responsive to dopamine, like a lock that doesn't turn smoothly. Having this version increases the risk of ADHD by about 50%. Others have a shorter version which seems to protect against ADHD, lowering the risk by about 10%. When receptors don't respond well to dopamine, the brain's ability to focus and filter out distractions is reduced. This is especially important in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps with attention, planning, and self-control. Why this matters for ADHD? These genetic differences don't guarantee that someone will have ADHD, but they can make it more likely. They affect how dopamine is used in the brain, which in turn influences attention and self-control. Interestingly, The main medications used for ADHD, like stimulants, work by targeting dopamine. They help keep dopamine in the synapse longer, so the message between neurons is stronger and clearer. This discovery came long before scientists understood the genetics, but it supports the idea that dopamine plays a central role in ADHD. Key takeaways. Dopamine must be carefully balanced. Too little or too much recycling can cause problems. Certain versions of dopamine-related genes, SLC6, A3, and DRD4, are linked to ADHD. These genes affect how dopamine is cleared away or how well receptors respond to it. ADHD medications work by boosting dopamine signaling, which helps improve focus and attention. This is just one piece of the puzzle. ADHD is influenced by many genes and environmental factors, but understanding dopamine gives an important window into why attention can be so challenging for some people. We've now taken a journey through the science of ADHD, exploring how the brain develops, how attention works, and how differences in brain structure, chemistry, and connectivity can shape the experiences of children and adults with ADHD. We've seen how executive functions, attention, and timing skills can be disrupted, and how these challenges are linked to the core symptoms of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. By understanding the brain basis of ADHD, it becomes clearer that this condition is not about laziness or lack of effort, but about real differences in how the brain processes information and manages focus and behavior. This knowledge provides a foundation for compassion, patience, and more effective support. In the next video, we'll move from understanding ADHD to exploring practical approaches for parents and caregivers. We'll look at strategies for managing ADHD at home and begin thinking about how to support a child's education in ways that build on their strengths while addressing their challenges. This next step will focus on turning knowledge into action, helping children with ADHD thrive both in learning and in everyday life. Click here to watch another video about some of the main worries surrounding home educating